I never thought I'd end up in the rental game. But life has a funny way of pushing you into things you never imagined. You see, I own this little apartment in Manhattan. Just a cozy one-bedroom place I inherited from my parents. For years it was my home, my sanctuary. But a couple of years ago things changed. My mom, who's in her late 70s now, needed more help, and living alone wasn't safe anymore. So I decided to move her in with me, but that meant I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. It just didn't make sense to keep it empty and watch the bills pile up. That's when I made the decision to rent it out. Honestly, I was a bit nervous. I'd never been a landlord before, didn't have the experience, and I knew New York tenants could be, let's just say, a bit unpredictable. But I needed to make this work, for my mom's sake, and because, let's face it, rent can help cover the mortgage and maintenance. I put up an ad online hoping to find someone responsible, someone who'd treat the place like it was their own. And that's when Emma emailed me. She said she was from Australia, planning to move to New York for work on a short-term contract, and was looking for a place that felt like home. She didn't have the usual references, no previous landlords from here, just some character references from her employer back in Sydney. That raised a tiny red flag for me. But there was something in her tone that felt genuine, almost earnest. Plus, she was enthusiastic about the apartment, asking detailed questions about the neighborhood, the building, even the neighbors. It didn't scream scammer or deadbeat, so I went with my gut. We met once, signed the lease, and she paid the first month's rent and security deposit up front. I felt a mix of relief and optimism. Sure, it was a bit of a leap of faith, but she seemed decent, and honestly I wanted to believe in people a little more than I probably should have in this city. For the first couple of months, everything was great. She paid rent on time, no complaints from neighbors, apparently took care of the place. I even exchanged a few friendly texts, checking in once in a while. She mentioned loving Central Park, the coffee shops nearby, and how much she was enjoying the city. Looking back, maybe I was too trusting, or maybe I was just caught up in needing things to be okay for my mom and myself. But it felt like the perfect arrangement. Helping Emma get settled in the city, and helping me keep the apartment occupied and secure. Little did I know, that's where the story started to unravel. Because then, out of nowhere, the rent stopped coming. Emma went silent. No calls, no texts. The locks changed. The apartment was empty. And when I finally got inside, I saw the mess she left behind. Broken fixtures, stains on the walls, garbage everywhere. I was stunned. Honestly, I didn't know what to do or where to even begin. At that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just a case of a late rent check or a tenant with cold feet. This was something else entirely. So yeah, here I was stuck with a damaged apartment and unpaid rent, facing the real nightmare of being a landlord to someone who vanished without a trace. I had to take action, but I wasn't about to let this go quietly. It was time to fight back. And that's how everything started to spiral from there. So, after I realized the rent for 7 months was MIA and the tenant was playing ghost, I figured the next logical step was to get legal. I mean, that's what you do, right? You think, alright, courts will sort this out. I filed the necessary paperwork, hoping it would be straightforward. But man, I had no idea how complicated and frustrating it would get. The thing is, this tenant, let's call her Claire, was pretty slick. First, I was just trying to be patient. I left messages, sent emails, even dropped by the apartment, but nothing. No answers, no back rent, no signs of life. Then the sheriff sent a notice to her last known address. Still silence. Claire simply vanished. No forwarding address, no explanations. It was like she disappeared off the face of the earth. Court dates came and went. I showed up ready with all my documents, hoping to get some judgment in my favor that could help me recoup at least a fraction of what I was owed. But Claire? No show. No lawyer, no apologies, no disputes, just a big fat no-show. The court eventually issued a default judgment against her. But here's the kicker. Claire had already booked a flight back to Australia and was long gone. That's when things got even messier. Because she left the country, enforcing that judgment felt next to impossible. International law? Cross-border enforcement? I honestly didn't know much about it then, but from what I gathered, jumping through hoops to chase down a judgment overseas was not only expensive but often futile. Sure, I could hire lawyers in Australia, but the costs would probably exceed whatever unpaid rent and damages I was trying to recover. And there was no guarantee I'd get anything back. On top of the missing rent, the apartment had damage when I finally got it cleaned and inspected. broken fixtures, scratches on the hardwood floors, even some electrical issues. All of it had to be fixed on my dime. Claire's security deposit was minimal and long gone, of course. It was like she took everything and left me with a bigger mess. Honestly, at that moment, it hit me how vulnerable landlords can be to tenants who disappear like this. It wasn't just about losing money. It felt like I'd been outplayed. There I was trying so hard to do things by the book, and Claire just vanished, leaving me with nothing but bills and frustration. I remember sitting in my kitchen one evening, bills piled up, and asking myself, what now? How do I even prevent this from happening again? Waiting for the legal system to act just wasn't going to cut it, not with someone who had effectively vanished halfway across the world. That's when the frustration started turning into a stubborn determination. I wasn't about to let Claire just walk away unscathed and able to do the same thing to someone else. So, I began thinking about a different kind of plan, a bold move, one that wouldn't rely on courts or international law but on something a little more public. I wanted to make sure her story and warning got out there loud and clear. Little did I know, this idea would set off a chain of events far beyond just my apartment walls. An unconventional form of revenge that would hopefully protect others from falling into the same trap. But first, I had to figure out exactly how to pull it off. I still remember the day I realized the usual methods just weren't enough. I'd filed the court claims, collected the judgments, and yet, the tenant, let's call her Sarah, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unpaid rent and serious damage to my apartment. It was frustrating, sure, but it was more than that. I wanted to do something that would actually stick with her, make sure she couldn't just walk away and do the same thing to someone else. That's when the idea hit me. Why not use the internet against her? After all, we live in a world where your online reputation is everything. I figured if I could make her name synonymous with the mess she left behind, maybe it would finally hit home, and maybe protect other landlords, tenants, and employers from being blindsided later. First, I needed something unique connected to Sarah, something that no one else would claim. Luckily for me, she had a personal domain name for her side hustle website. It was still registered but completely inactive, so I bought it. Securing that domain felt like planting a flag in the digital space, a place where I could tell my side clearly and factually. Building the website was therapeutic in a weird way. I wasn't out to smear her with gossip or exaggerated stories. I kept it straightforward with the facts. The unpaid rent totaling thousands, the photos of the trashed apartment, the official court judgments, and documented communications where I'd been more than patient. I even included a timeline of everything, to leave no room for confusion. It was like laying out a public record that no one could dispute. I was nervous about how it would be received, but I told myself this was just about transparency. After all, if she'd acted honestly, there'd be nothing for me to share. To make sure the site actually reached people interested in her, I dived into some basic SEO tactics. I didn't mess around with tricks or clickbait. I focused on making the page clear, credible, and directly tied to searches for her name. It was important that when someone looked her up, whether an employer, a landlord, or even friends curious about what she'd been up to, this site would come up first. Honestly, the first few weeks after launching it, I felt a weird mix of satisfaction and guilt. Part of me wanted to hope Sarah had somehow turned over a new leaf. But the reality was, the digital record was now out there. It was permanent, or at least as permanent as the internet can be. And then the unexpected started to happen. I began hearing from people who found the site. A small business owner who'd been considering hiring her reached out to thank me for the info. Friends who just happened upon the site sent messages wondering if she was okay, or if she tried to explain herself. Even a couple of landlords who'd had similar problems with a tenant matching her description got in touch. The most surreal moment was when I heard from a property manager who told me Sarah had recently applied to rent another place in New York. The manager had Googled her name just in case, and was stunned by the website. Apparently, the candid photos and official documents raised enough red flags for them to pass on her application. At this point, I couldn't help but think, I may have outsmarted a tenant who thought she'd gotten away with it. She disappeared from my life physically, but digitally, she was impossible to ignore. I knew this wasn't going to be a quick fix. This kind of digital presence takes time to cement. I checked back regularly, keeping the site updated with any new court proceedings or additional communications. Each update felt like adding another brick to a wall no one could tear down. I have to admit, part of me worried about how far this might go. Was I being too harsh? Would this hurt her chances to rebuild, assuming she wanted to? But deep down, I believed protecting others was more important than mercy for someone who treated a home, and the people who cared for it, with such disregard. For years now, the site has stayed active and consistently at the top of search results for her name. I know she's probably seen it, maybe she's tried to ignore it, but the truth is there for anyone to find. It's become a constant reminder that actions have consequences, especially in an age where the internet keeps score better than any court ever could. Looking back, I realize this digital justice was exactly the kind of long-lasting impact I needed. Sarah's reputation, that thing we all tried to build and protect, is now intertwined with the story of her reckless exit. And that has changed everything. But with the website up and running like this for years, I still find myself thinking about how much longer it will shape her life, and what else might come next. Almost 3 years have passed since I launched that website exposing my tenants' antics. And honestly, I still can't believe how much impact it's had. Not just on her, but also on me and a bunch of people who might have fallen into the same trap. I remember at first feeling a little anxious about keeping the site up for so long. Would it even matter after all this time? But every week I'd check in, and the visitor count kept climbing, along with emails from others who'd either had run-ins with her or were grateful to avoid a similar situation. It became sort of this living archive of what not to do when you're dealing with tenants or just people in general. What's crazy is how her life started unraveling because of the site. I'm not talking about some quick internet shaming that fades after a few months. No, this was long-term. Because now, whenever she tried to rent an apartment or even apply for a job, her name showed up alongside the story, as proof she wasn't reliable. Landlords wouldn't call her back. Employers got wary. People who knew her started distancing themselves. And I won't pretend I felt bad about any of that. People have to face the consequences of their actions, especially when they hurt others and then vanish like that. I'm pretty sure she's realized by now that trying to ghost out without paying was the worst decision she could have made. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she's constantly looking over her shoulder, worried about what comes next. There's a kind of justice in that. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but accountability that sticks with you. For me, this whole experience taught me a lot about protecting yourself in this crazy rental market. It's not just about contracts and deposits anymore. You have to think creatively about how to safeguard your property and hold people responsible in ways they can't easily escape. The internet can be a powerful ally if you use it right. I still get messages every now and then from other landlords or renters thanking me for shining a light on her behavior, warning others who might be tempted to pull the same stunt. That just feels like closure, but also a sense of continuing to do something positive from a negative situation. Looking back, what started as pure frustration and helplessness ended up turning into a kind of quiet victory. She thought she could disappear and get away with it, but the truth wasn't going anywhere. And that truth became her biggest obstacle. So yeah, the website's still up and running, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that sometimes the best payback isn't instant. It's the slow burn that changes everything, and maybe even stops someone else from making the same mistake. If you're thinking about pulling anything like that, just remember, the internet never forgets. And neither do I.